Hello, everyone, and welcome to StudyTravel TV Live, a show of news, statistics, and opinion now on a new broadcast day of Wednesday. I'm Nicola Hancox, editor of StudyTravel Magazine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bethan Norris, senior editor. Before we get started, for the best viewing experience, please put the call in side-by-side speaker view. You'll see an icon in the top right corner where you can select the view.
We are delighted to welcome you all today to the latest episode of StudyTravel TV Live. In today's broadcast, we'll start with a news story, and then we will be joined by our guest this week, Jodie Gray, CEO of English UK, and Jorge Gómez, Director of Educonnecting Student Agency in Colombia.
We'll then introduce a few more stories as we go through the show. If you have any questions for the presenters or guest speakers or comments on the stories, please post them in the chat box and we'll read them out at the end. A big thank you to our sponsor, Felka. Okay, let's have a look at our main story this week. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has announced that an 18-month ban on overseas travel will be lifted from next month once states reach vaccination targets of 80%. The plan would see Australian citizens and permanent residents who are fully vaccinated be allowed to travel overseas and quarantine at home for 7 days upon their return, while those who are not vaccinated would be required to complete a 14-day quarantine at a hotel once they return.
In a previous announcement, just days before Scott Morrison made his speech, the government of New South Wales announced that a pilot plan to bring international students into the state would commence in December with the approval of the federal government. So at this point, we'd like to introduce our guests, Jodie and George. Hello. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having us.
Pleasure. So this would seem to be an exciting development for Australian providers, as well as international students who have been waiting to start their studies in Australia for nearly 2 years now. However, the Australian federal government has effectively handed over border control during COVID to the independent or individual states, and some states like Tasmania, Western Australia and Queensland have not agreed to open, even at the 80% vaccination rates. So George, we'll come to you first. Is the federal government just making positive pre-festive noises, given that Melbourne set the world record of 247 days hard lockdown in total this week, and only 54% of the Australian population is fully vaccinated at the moment?
Well, we in Australia, there's a lot of things that have happened in the last 18 months, obviously. But in the last 6 months is where we've seen the vaccination actually happening. A lot of things have been said within the states, and I know Queensland, which is where I am now, have had a lot of differences with the Prime Minister. Although I think we're going in a very good moment. I know he says it's 54% in a single dose, but then the projection goes to, yes, we get into 80, and most likely they're trying to get Christmas like everyone together. So I believe it will happen, and I'm also having faith that this will happen, because it's also a step forward to the borders opening for the international industry. So yeah. Sure.
I mean, we should perhaps mention here that Educonnecting was a double winner at this year's Star Awards, StudyTravel Star Awards. So congratulations. But how has your agency business been doing while the borders with Australia have been closed? And has there been a big difference with your staff in Colombia and the staff in Australia, such as with government support and things like that?
Yes, it's been a huge challenge for us. Obviously, we're in Australia. We operate in Australia, and we also operate in South America. So in Australia, we were kind of lucky. Our South American students, not many of them left the country compared to European students, and some of the Brazilians as well have left the country within these 18 months. So we have been able to cope with the business with the students that are in Australia. So that was, let's say, a lucky strike for us, I will say. For the offshore, which is our operation in Colombia, has been a lot more difficult. We had to deal with the students that were wanting to come since March 2020. A lot of them were, well, I will say 70% of them was wanting to go to another country, but we were telling them, okay, Australia, because I will say that 90% of our business is Australia. And they stayed in anyways. A lot of them, 30% would have canceled their process or left to another country. In terms of our staff and the government support, that's another challenge that we lived in Australia, because although we were pretty busy for the first 12 months, the last 6 months have been very, very difficult. As we mentioned, Melbourne and Sydney has been in lockdown for quite a long time. The government has been supporting staff. They've been receiving $750 every week. That have put some pressure because a lot of people will prefer not to work and receive the benefits, I will say it. So it's been challenging as well for employers in Australia to maintain their staff as well. And I would say like temporary residents will make a big chunk of a lot of this kind of work. So we had a big challenge there. Although and they have been supporting a lot the government, but in Colombia we've barely received something. So people had to continue working. Let's say our operation in Australia is quite big, and we were able to keep most of our staff during these times. We actually grow our headcount. So yeah, there's this difference between of how we have lived it here, which not much COVID cases and stuff like that. Although yes, the lockdowns have been long in Victoria. We have offices in Victoria and in New South Wales as well. And in Colombia, we kind of live the first 6 months in lockdown, and people were working from home and stuff like that. So let's say we have been able to handle it, and I think the time is coming to an end. I will wish that that's happening.
Okay, well, let's hope so. So, of course, the UK's new entry rules also came into effect this week, Jodie, with travellers from 17 more countries being exempt from quarantine measures and PCR tests being scrapped for vaccinated passengers. Boris Johnson has also announced that the red list would be cut to just 9 countries from 54 later in the month. This would seem to be a huge step forward towards business as usual. Is it what we've all been waiting for, Jodie?
We hope so, yes. It does feel like the light at the end of a very dark tunnel is starting to burn a bit brighter. So now vaccinated adults, as you said, Bethan, and all under 18s, really importantly, from over 50 countries are exempt from quarantine on arrival to the UK, and they only have to take one post-arrival COVID test, which is brilliant. It's really simplified the system. The system before was much more complicated. So we do feel very positive about this, particularly since among those 50 countries that have their vaccine program approved by the UK government for these arrivals who don't have to quarantine are arrivals from Europe. And Europe has always been the most important source regions for students for the UK ELT sector, with before COVID more than 40% of students arriving from European countries. So that is really hopeful. And we are already starting to hear back from some of our members that bookings picked up in response to that announcement, which came before the change was actually made this Monday. So we do feel more positive, and it's been a long time coming. So we're very thankful for that.
Okay, thank you. Let's look at another story now. Latest figures released by Languages Canada show that the COVID-19 pandemic and related border closures led to a 56% decrease in student numbers at member centres in 2020.
The 196 English and French language school members of Languages Canada in the survey welcomed 65,536 international students in 2020, 56.3% decrease compared with the previous year. Student weeks, meanwhile, declined by 49.2% to 768 and 22 weeks, with the average course duration increasing to 11.7 weeks.
Chinese numbers held up better than any other markets, with just a 42% decline, making China the largest source market for Languages Canada schools in 2020, leapfrogging Brazil and Japan, markets which are typically more reliant on visitor students.
So, Jodie, most of the association data concerning language student numbers in the major English language destinations worldwide has now been published for 2020. And it is interesting to note that while all destinations suffered declines last year, some were much harder hit than others. The UK, for example, suffered decreases of 84% in student numbers and 71% in student weeks in 2020, one of the hardest hit destinations. So why do you think the pandemic affected UK language schools more than those in, say, Canada or Australia? And do you think the UK has the potential to bounce back quicker, maybe, than other destinations, given its rapid vaccination programme and the latest change to UK travel rules?
I think we had, in the UK, we have a shorter length of stay than most of the other English language speaking destinations. So the average length of stay for an adult student in the UK before the pandemic is around 4 weeks. And for junior students, who represent more than half, 54% of all of the students who study English in the UK, is just 2 weeks. So they, I think, particularly hard hit by border restrictions and quarantine. So in the UK, as we're all aware, and still is the case for students arriving from some countries, there is a quarantine requirement, which basically means it's a 2-week course is just too short, and equally a 4-week course as well. So we have a lot more junior students and a lot shorter stay students, which I think means that the border restrictions that came into place and the massive dip in travel confidence affected the short-term study market probably more than the longer-term study market. So students are coming for 6 months, 9 months, a year, may have made the decision to continue to travel, and those students are smaller in number or take up a less percentage of our market. Of course, we also had and still have pretty poor metrics when it comes to COVID-19, the number of cases we have here, and that has an impact. I know that from speaking to colleagues at the British Council and agent partners in places like the Asia Pacific, in China, for example, that there is still a very low level of confidence in terms of traveling to the UK because of the numbers of cases that we have here, despite the high level of vaccination. So I think that's probably another factor. In terms of whether how quickly we're going to bounce back and whether we'll bounce back quicker than other destinations, I mean, I hope so. The sector has been incredibly resilient, which is something that we're tremendously proud of at English UK. So despite the fact that student numbers were down 80%, student week 70% in 2020, we only, and I use the word only lightly because for every single one of these businesses that had to close, it was devastating, but we only permanently lost around 15% of our members. So they had to close down permanently as a result of that, which is quite incredible when you think that in the UK, essentially the tap that was turned off for students arriving in March 2020, and it didn't really get going again until later this year. And we've seen 2 summers not happen, and with the UK being a very seasonal market, that's very difficult to deal with. Essentially, we're heading into our 5th consecutive winter as a sector. Although, as I said earlier, we are feeling more positive, and at least now students are able to travel here more freely and easily with the new border restrictions and system in place. But I think the resilience has been quite incredible, and it speaks to the strength of the UK ELT sector before the pandemic. 2019 was our 3rd year of consecutive growth. It speaks to the commitment of people who tend to run language schools to what they do and to international education and in English language teaching. And I think all of those things and the incredible amounts of innovation that we saw during the pandemic will sets the industry up in a great way to take advantage of recovery. And I really hope that when we look back at this point next year, we'll be looking back at a brilliant summer and growth, huge growth from a very low point, but that we'll be looking back and thinking we're heading in the right direction.
Great, thank you. And George, Australia is, you mentioned earlier that Australia is the major destination for your Colombian students, but Canada, New Zealand and Malta are also Educonnecting destinations. So what's been your comparative experience of each of these 4 destinations and their government's responses during the pandemic?
Okay, so during the pandemic, what we saw from the offshore, I will say from our offshore offices and operations, obviously, and when we were seeing the numbers in Canada, a lot of people are or most of the offshore agencies are promoting Canada a lot, and Malta. So it became a very this destination became very popular within the students that wanted to travel. A lot of the agencies stopped selling Australia because there were no option for them to come to Australia. So I will say that I wouldn't know much about what from the government perspective and what has happened in the countries. I know from the point of view of visas. So I know Canada, they opened borders, but the visas were taking long. Up until I think it was 9 to 10, 12 months to actually being granted. And New Zealand has been the same story. Like Australia is been closed for like since we started the COVID. Malta became popular, but it's for a different niche. It's more for younger students or probably I will say people that want to just go and come and have a fun day. Our market will be more for young professionals, people looking for work and study at the same time. So I will say Canada, from our perspective, became very popular within our students. And that's where most of the students are going at the moment, because Australia is still closed for international students. So yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, back to the UK, and the English UK Marketing Conference was held face-to-face in London last week, and highlighted the importance of Western European students for future recovery, as well as promoted the hashtag English with Confidence campaign and provided tips for marketing and sales activities online and on a budget.
The conference schedule of events consisted of a number of presentations, including the new world of digital marketing, sales, action, energy, and motivation in post-COVID times, and email marketing, the hidden hero of direct student bookings. So, Jodie, English UK held one of the first face-to-face industry events globally for nearly 2 years and welcomed 3 new members last month. I attended the event last week, and many schools told me that they were experiencing quite a lot of inquiries and bookings over the last few weeks. How confident are you that we are now entering a time of reliable business growth?
Thanks, Beth. And look how happy everybody is at the conference. We all had a great time seeing each other face to face. I mean, I think of anything, the last 18 months has just taught us that we have to expect the unexpected. So speaking with any certainty about what's going to happen over the next coming months is probably something that I would caution against. But certainly, as we've mentioned, the schools in the UK have had so few students over the course of the last 18 months that we have to be heading up from here. We have to be. And certainly that was, you're right, the chat at the marketing conference. And it was so brilliant to see people face to face, and particularly ELT marketers. You know, they are fun people, and it was great to see people and exchange ideas and to start thinking about the future, because for so long it's been firefighting, and English UK has had a strategy for the last 18 months called our response and recovery strategy, and we've really been focused on response. It's all been about trying to secure the support, the UK government support that the ELT sector deserved and needed, and about dealing with the situation as it faced us, with making sure that our members could operate in a COVID-19 secure way, and that staff and the communities and students were all safe. But looking forward to recovery, something that we've been thinking about. In fact, we published earlier in the year our roadmap to recovery. And I do feel that we are now starting on that roadmap, which was exciting because now is the time, and this is what came through in the marketing conference, to really examine how we market the industry, how we promote the industry, how we run things, to look at everything, because if not now, then when? And that in itself is quite exciting. And I really had a sense of that at the conference with all the delegates.
And there are still some particular barriers affecting UK language schools at the moment, though, and not least the lack of recognition of the Russian and Chinese vaccines by the UK government, which means that over 18s from these countries still have to quarantine when they come to the UK. So, Jodie, would you expect these markets are going to be slower to recover than some of the others?
Yes, yeah, and in fact, under 18s, if it's only the under 18s from the markets with the approved vaccine program that are quarantine free, even if they're not vaccinated. So yes, absolutely, and that's a big concern. In 2019, China was our second biggest market, hugely important, particularly for junior students in the summer, and our expectation is that that market is going to be very slow to recover. We held a webinar with the British Council in China and other partners just last week for members to give them an update. And while there was lots of positivity about the kind of medium to longer term future for a market like China, and in fact we had also a focus on other East Asian markets and Southeast Asian markets like Thailand, and there is positivity for the future, but in terms of the short term, in terms of next year, I think that those markets are going to be very slow to come back. Partly, yes, because the vaccines that have been used in those markets are not yet approved, although I know that Australia has approved one of the Chinese vaccines, which is good, because maybe that means that the UK might move in that direction, and that would be amazing. But there are other reasons too, with China in particular. There is a long quarantine on return to China, which means that short-term students just aren't going to be interested. Some of them will need to quarantine for up to 3 weeks, if not longer, depending on which province they're from. So that is particularly difficult. There is still a kind of still guidance from the Chinese government against non-essential travel. There's a sense that those quarantine restrictions in China aren't going to change until after the Winter Olympics, which puts us into mid-late spring next year, which is already very late if we're talking about the summer. And there's also a sense, I think, that we have from our partners in China that there is still a lot of caution about travel, particularly sending young students, junior students, to the UK at the moment, and parents will err on the side of caution for now. So for all of those reasons, I think that those markets aren't going to recover very quickly, which is a concern and a challenge, and something that we will have to deal with. We really feel that the recovery of the UK ELT sector is going to be driven by Europe, because similar issues are faced in Latin America as well. And that has to be a big focus, not least because Europe, of course, has been impacted by Brexit and the end of freedom of movement, although students can still very easily travel to the UK from Europe. And that is the message that we need to put out, and why we are now putting a lot of effort into our English with Confidence campaign focused on Europe, to make sure that agents, partners, influencers, parents, families, students are really clear on how easy it is for them to come to the UK to study, and are really encouraged to do so.
Okay, thank you. And George, Australia, as Jodie just mentioned, Australia has recently approved one of the Chinese vaccines, Sinovac, as well as the Indian vaccine, Covishield. So what's the most common vaccine for Colombian students, and is vaccine recognition an issue for them?
Yes, last week when the Prime Minister mentioned about moving into the stage C, they also mentioned about approving this Sinovac. I've been checking with our students and obviously our staff in Colombia, and some of the vaccinations or more common vaccinations that we're receiving in Colombia is AstraZeneca, which is one of the approved ones here in Australia. We have Pfizer, the Sinovac, and Janssen, which is also being approved in Australia. So I think we won't have that much of a trouble. I see it more in Brazil. In Brazil, they've got their own vaccines, and obviously this one hasn't been approved in Australia. Although what the government has said and what I've read about the vaccination is that the ones that have been not approved, they will have to do quarantine. So the people that they still want to come and study in Australia, they will have to go for the 14 days quarantine. What I'll think is that for the students in Colombia and obviously the ones that have these ones will have very similar treatment to what they have said about the 7 days. We'll see. There's a lot of things happening and changing every week in Australia, but I'm being very positive, probably very optimistic that what they've done is they're trying to bring everyone back by December this year. We'll see what happens. They're trying to reach, they even say that we might reach 90% vaccination by the beginning of December. And that will mean we move into phase D, which is the last phase where there's no restriction. That's like coming back to normal, to the new normal, let's say. So I wouldn't be surprised that that by December we might get the students and with no restrictions. Probably with these other vaccinations, they might have to do the quarantine. But there's a lot of things that I will be able to say the way they're trying to do the pilot to bring international students, the quarantine centers or the places where they're planning to bring the students in. What is happening now, and I will say, and what is happening now with the students that they want to bring in this coming month is most of them are higher education students. They were mentioning about India and China, probably. That's why I believe the Sinovac has been approved as well, because there were a lot of tension within universities. But I think we're okay. We were lucky as well, and there's a lot of Colombians that have been already vaccinated. I'm not 100% what percentage there are in vaccination over there, but I know that most of the students that are lining up to come to Australia, they've been vaccinated. They've been vaccinated with these 4 AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Sinovac, or Janssen, which they have been all approved. There's some Moderna as well, and in Australia as well, Moderna has been approved. So let's say that we also been lucky there, if that it's gonna be the terms for them to come to Australia.
Okay, thank you.
Jodie, you must be delighted to be taking in new members. Schools can obviously see the great work you're doing and the importance of association membership and working together, which you also touched upon. So do you have any association targets or new projects for 2022 that you'll be working on?
Yeah, no, thanks, Nicola. It's absolutely brilliant to have new members. And hopefully we'll see more, because of course now language schools need to be accredited in order to accept students in the UK from anywhere in the world, and we offer a service that helps new entrants into accreditation get their accreditation, and then hopefully they join English UK. So that's brilliant. In terms of future projects, I think I mentioned earlier the English with Confidence campaign. In fact, you guys mentioned it in relation to the marketing conference, and this really is something that we see as critical, because our main aim now is to make sure that we get as many students as possible returning as quickly as possible to the UK. It's pretty straightforward. Well, I mean, that's the aim, is straightforward. Doing it is something else. But the English with Confidence campaign is something that I think we're really proud of. It's the first time that the 3 big national players in the UK involved in the promotion of the ELT sector have come together on one campaign. So that's English UK, the British Council, and the Department for International Trade. And it's something that we've been thinking about and wanting to do for a long time, and COVID-19 and the kind of throwing out of what was past and this sort of new normal, for want of a much better phrase, gave us this opportunity to do it. And it's something that we know that our competitors, like in Australia and in Canada, they're very good at running at having one national agency be in charge of promoting their international education sector and running incredibly strong campaigns that we've always looked at with envy in their target markets. So the English with Confidence campaign is our attempt to do that. And it's under the government's Great brand. And it's all about, at the moment, giving that really clear, reassuring information to our partners, agents, parents, influencers, and stakeholders in market about COVID-19 travel, about visas, and about why the UK ELT sector is the best. And it's a campaign that's going to be successful, and this is what I think makes it so brilliant. It's based entirely on amplifying messages. So we are working with British embassies overseas, with British council offices overseas, and also with all of our member centres, asking them to amplify these messages, so that if you are, for example, an agent in Italy or in Spain, and you're looking for information on the ELT sector, then you might see the same message about visas or about border restrictions on various different channels and various different places that you follow on social media. And that will hopefully make you feel very reassured and very informed about what you need to know to then guide your student to choosing an English language course in the UK.
Thank you, Jodie. Okay, we'll move on to another story. Study Australia, which Jodie was talking about or touching on just then. The government organisation responsible for promoting the study abroad sector in Australia has announced the launch of its new online employability hub to offer customised resources to help prepare international students for employment across the globe.
The hub is a collection of tools and information to help international students to become more attractive to an employer, and also brings together information from the federal, state and territory governments.
New features included in the Employability Hub include the Study Australia Work Readiness Programme, which offers a free micro-credential ID to those looking to enter the job market, and the Study Australia Industry Experience Programme, bringing international students from around the world into small project teams to work directly with employers in Australia and worldwide.
So, George, do you think the hub will be well used by your clients?
I definitely think that this was something that we were missing in Australia by the, let's say, the result of what we see in Australia, as I probably was mentioning before. The need of international students in Australia for the workforce is very, very, very important. And we're seeing a huge issue now. Like we're hiring everywhere in every single city, and we have found none to try to work. There could be several different reasons, but it's not only in our industry. In every single industry, they've been seeing I will say lack of staff. And the Australian government and the Australians have realized that this workforce that they were doing, hospitality, or it could be tech or marketing, like every single industry now is being impacted because there's no staff. So I think it's great because international students in Australia, and I will talk about more this South American market probably, and a bit of a European market. I'm not very familiar with the Asian market. They're young professionals. So Australian employers and Australian businesses, they don't know how much good stuff they could get from the international students. And I think that there was a missing, this was a missing piece, because us as agencies, we try to connect the industries and employers with the international students, and we also advocate about the professional careers and how they can do professional jobs, I will say, which there's a vast I will say quantity of these opportunities in Australia. So I think it will be great. I hope. I haven't read much. I read today something about it, but I haven't read much. Hopefully, it's also focused in different markets, because everything in Australia is more to the Asians, to the Asian students, or to the Asian markets, Indian and China and Vietnam, but not to. And it's not that it's not open. It's just not. I will say it's not just. Let's say it's not just move into, let's say, to us, the agencies that work with the other markets, but I think it will be great. I know when they do these programs, they do help a lot of students. Once again, our students, they're young professionals, so they already know how to work. Probably they just need an introduction to the Australian market, and I'll definitely think that it will help the students. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Jodie, work rights for language students at private language schools are still not available in the UK. How important would these rights be for your members, do you think?
I mean, they would be brilliant, and that would put us on a par with some of our competitors, and also mean that some markets that we know have decreased because of this issue might come back and be stronger in the future. I would say, though, that the introduction of the graduate route last year, though it's not for our members and it's not for English language students, is important in the sense that many English language students come to the UK to study an English language course, to then go on to a university, and then at least there is then a route for them to go into employment in the UK after that. So that is definitely a welcome development, and provides that route for those students who are wanting to progress to university from their English language courses. We are also working with the Home Office and UK Visas and Immigration on trying to get some more countries, particularly where there are lots of English language students and markets that are important for us, and part of the Youth Mobility Scheme programmes. The UK recently signed 2 new Youth Mobility Scheme agreements with India and Iceland, so not necessarily not UK, not ELT markets just yet, but those schemes I think would be really beneficial to our members in terms of allowing students to come and have quite a flexible program and work and study at the same time. So we know that the Home Office and the government is keen to sign more of these agreements, and we're keen to push them in the right direction.
Great, thank you. Okay, another story then. International Health World Organization launched a 40,000 kilometer walk challenge on the 1st of October as part of its environmental sustainability policy, which was added to its corporate strategy in February 2020.
The global chain of language schools has challenged staff and students of IH schools around the world to walk a combined 40,000 kilometres, which represents the circumference of the Earth, through October, November and December this year. Participants will be encouraged to walk short everyday journeys instead of taking their car, in a bid to save harmful CO2 emissions and change their habits.
Jodie, this is an area of corporate social responsibility that was touched upon during the English UK marketing conference last week. One speaker mentioned that green issues were very important to the younger generations, and they were actively looking to engage with companies who undertook green and socially responsible activities. So in light of the fact that language travel is not necessarily the greenest activity that a young person can engage in, how important is it for schools to show that they are trying to mitigate their carbon footprint and engage in green activities? And do you think this is something that all schools will need to look at in the future?
Yes, absolutely. And it's definitely something on the agenda at the moment, isn't it? Especially in the UK, with COP26 coming up, being held in the UK in just a few weeks' time. I think it's definitely an issue that is important, and that more and more schools are looking at. And I know that there are a number of members that have done a huge amount, have been really pioneers in this area. So people that are a part of the ELT Footprint UK group have done a great job about raising this issue on the agenda. And we also have a corporate member, Green Standard Schools, and a number of our members are accredited by them. So they've actually gone through a process of accreditation and against various criteria around sustainability. And I think that that scheme, the Green Standard Schools, really does show that it's not about are your students taking lots of short-term flights to come here. There's a lot more to being an environmentally conscious and green business than that. It's not as binary as that. And I think it's really interesting, and their scheme is very positive. At English UK, we are working on a strategy which will follow a kind of similar vein in terms of looking at the bigger picture as our anti-racism action plan that we published earlier this year. This will be around environment and sustainability, and we will be publishing it around the time of COP26, when those discussions, I'm sure, will be top of mind for lots of people in the sector.
Okay, thank you. And George, how important are green issues for Colombian students? Do you think it's an important decision-making factor for them?
I will think that it's important for the younger students. That's what we've seen, I will say, with Gen Z more than millennials, which is our vast majority of students. I will definitely think it's an important factor for the future students. I think we'll have a good amount of school leavers, like junior students, in Colombia, in South America to bring. So I think it will be important. This is not much that we speak from our side to students of how green or how much the schools in Australia are doing. I know there's some schools in Australia that have been involving the students that are currently here doing a lot of different things. So like they're going green and stuff like that. So I think it's not yet for our market something that that will make or it will take an impact on the decision. But yes, for the new generations are more into that, and I believe yes, it will impact on the decision process.
Okay, thank you. And we'll take one last story now. ACE Education Group and Bayswater Education have announced a partnership for the delivery of English language training to all Amos Sports Business School undergraduates, starting from the 2021-22 academic year.
Eurocentres, a division of Bayswater Education, will provide online teaching to over 1,000 students based in France and face-to-face teaching for over 500 students at Amos's London campus in Greenwich.
All students will gain access to my.Eurocentres, a platform that allows students to track their progress, be given targeted exercises to improve their language level, and allow teachers and students to communicate.
So Jodie, it's noticeable that the last 18 months have been a time of hibernation for many language schools, but also innovation and increased partnerships, and in some cases even growth. For example, Bayswater took over Eurocentres in 2020 in the height of the pandemic. So what has impressed you most about the resilience of English UK members? If you could give us a few examples, that would be great.
Yeah, I think that when you talk about partnership and collaboration, that has really been the key to it. And we would love to see that continuing and more of it going forward. One example of that, and in fact, we're about to repeat this project again, was Prelim, which is a project that we ran together. And it was the first time that we'd done this, really. We had the British Council secured some development money, we divided it up into 20 different grants, and then our members, English UK member centres, worked in partnership with teaching associations in other developing countries to deliver remote training to teachers that are part of that teaching association. And it was a partnership and collaborative on so many levels. It was run by a triumvirate of English UK, the British Council, and TEFL. So the first time we three had worked together in that way. And B, it was all about a UK English language teaching centre, an English UK member, working together with a teaching association from another country. And then C, there was a community, we set up a communities of practice so that all of the English UK member centres could collaborate, could learn from each other's experience, because it was the first time many of them were working in this way in those particular markets. And the report that we're about to publish just shows what a huge success it was in terms of learning on both sides. So obviously, the aim was that the teachers in these countries would become more confident with their English language speaking abilities, but also there was huge learning on the UK side, and that was such a joy to see, and particularly the way that everybody worked together. And that project will be repeated, and we actually have double the funding, double the number of grants, double the countries, double the partnerships, and that will be launched later this month. So that's really exciting. So Prelim 2 is coming.
Fantastic. And George, how about you? What has impressed or surprised you about the activities of agencies and schools over the last 18 months?
Okay, so it's been in Australia, and I can tell you how the whole industry has kind of collapsed and get up again, and a lot of schools have closed. I will kind of criticize a little bit the lack of communication between us being part of the industry. A lot of schools, they made decisions where affected the students and affected the industry and the agencies, obviously. I will say that it's not their fault. No one was prepared for something like this, and I think this industry was not an exception of not knowing what to do. But I think everyone is trying to to survive. We're still seeing, because Australia is closed to the world, so we still see a lot of schools struggling at the moment for obvious reasons. More those ones that were reliant on only offshore students, like English schools. Some of them has been able to manage and even grow in the number of students within those students that are in Australia. I was talking, and I talk a lot with my key partners, and I was telling them that I was actually very surprised, because most of the students in Australia from our market, I will say, they were wanting to improve the English. And I'll say, like, I don't understand why the English schools are not actually marketing to these students that need English, because they might be doing a vocational course or a higher education, and they might need more English. And we did a campaign for a free English IELTS preparation for a week. And we had a vast, I believe we have about 500 students wanting to do the course and continue studying. So I think there should have been more communication between the schools and us. There's pricing, and there's a price war everywhere. Agencies, they're giving free visas and free insurance and stuff like that. But I think the biggest problem that we've been seeing is that they've been small players that have been trying to cope with the business, and they're trying to do whatever it takes to survive, I will say, which is very bad for the industry and for the satisfaction point of view of the students. So the ones and the schools that have been able to manage in a proper way and to manage a good communication with the big agents, I will say, including us, have been able to be okay, even if there's no students from offshore. Just to give you an idea, our company grew in sales in the last year. Obviously not to the same growth, but we still been able to grow. So a lot of the schools that did not struggle, they did well, and they're full still. But I love that they didn't know how to, or they didn't have the partners, probably they struggled very, very heavily. So yeah, that's what I will say from our market inside of Australia, because it's the only market that we have now.
Okay, thank you, George. So that brings us up to date, I think, with all the news and goings on in the industry. At this point, we'll completely open up to the audience to see if there are any questions, which I think there are in the chat for our guests. So just to reiterate, these can be about any of the stories or topics we have discussed. So do please make sure that your organisation and your name are in your Zoom name or in the question. So if we just flick to the chat. And I think the first one we had was one for Jodie. Can you explain the status of students coming from amber countries? This is from Monica Thompson. I understand they have to travel first, 10 days minimum, to another country, and then have 3 negative tests plus 10-day quarantine.
No, so from Monday, from the 4th of October, there is no longer an amber list for the UK. In the UK, we have just the red list, which is managed quarantine in a hotel that you have to book using the government's portal. And then there is everybody else. And everybody else is divided into 2 groups. One group is those arriving from one of the list of 50 countries that have a vaccine program approved by the UK. That includes all European countries and the USA and 17 others. For adults arriving from those countries who are fully vaccinated and all under 18s, there is no quarantine and they have to take a COVID test on day 2 after arrival. For anyone arriving from those countries and from the rest of the world that are not on red list countries, so anyone else arriving from those countries who are not fully vaccinated and are over the age of 18, and for everybody from the rest of the world who are not on the red list, they do have to quarantine in their accommodation on arrival. That quarantine is 10 days. It can be shortened if you use the test to release scheme on day 5 in England. And you have to take a COVID test before traveling to the UK within 3 days of getting on the plane or wherever you're traveling, and take a day 2 and day 8 COVID test after arrival. I don't know, Monica, where you're from or where your student's from, but that is the situation now. The very best place to go for the best information that is very clear, because we know that government websites aren't always clear, is to go to the English with Confidence website. That is study.englishuk.com, and there is a whole page there on COVID-19, and that will give you everything that you need to know.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jodie.
Okay, I can't see any more questions in the chat, so I think that's the end of our audience Q&A. And this brings us to the end of this week's StudyTravel TV Live. We hope you have enjoyed it. If you'd like to come along to the next one on October the 20th, visit the StudyTravel TV Live page on StudyTravel Network, which you can find under the magazine section in the menu.
We'll be announcing the guest speakers for the next broadcast on this page, and you can also find the recording of this episode and past episodes in the listing at the bottom.
And finally, we'd like to say a big thank you to our special guests. Jodie, thank you for your time and insights today.
Thank you very much for having me.
And George, thank you once again. We look forward to seeing you again very soon.
Very happy to be here. Thank you, guys.
And thank you again to our sponsor this week, Felka. And thank you to you for watching. Goodbye.
Goodbye.